All right.
What? So wait, 1 sec. Let me just. All right, I'm good.
Okay.
You
Good.
you want me to spell my name? Or you want my full name or just how I go by?
Okay. Well, first I'll start. I'm Roberto Santos. I'm here, and we're here today to commemorate the 150th anniversary by interviewing members of our community about our history. So you can just spell your name. You can spell your full name.
Okay, so officially I'm Roberto, Roberto, with the middle initial L, Santos, S-A-N-T as in Tom O-S. But most people know me as Rob, which is with 2 B's, R-O-B-B, Santos, S-A-N-T-O-S, from the class of 1991.
Nice. Okay, so let's get started. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for thinking of me for this project.
So let's just start by can you tell me a little bit about like where and how you grew up?
Okay, so we're 12 hours apart right now. I'm in the Philippines, which is where I grew up.
Wow.
I left the Philippines. I left the Philippines in 1984 when I was 15 years old. Landed in New York City. Did a couple of years in New York City before I graduated high school from Xavier on 16th Street, and enrolled at St. Peter's in 1986. So that's where I'm from and how I got to St. Peter's in terms of geographically and all that. But yeah, Brooklyn's where we lived for a good part of 2 years. Where I lived for a good part of 2 years. My parents continued to live there until I was done with college. And then ultimately everybody moved to New Jersey. They lived in New Jersey around 1990, 91. So I'm kind of a New York, New Jersey guy.
So you moved when you lived in Brooklyn, that wasn't with your parents?
Yeah, my parents, my mom and dad decided to move to the US around that time, maybe 84. So we were first, temporarily with my aunt, my mom's sister, in Manhattan. But then my mom found an apartment in Brooklyn. So that's where we stayed for, I stayed for a couple of years, and I went to St. Peter's as Veterans Memorial Court. We were I was, I think, the second or third batch of people that went into vets.
Wow.
I was at 146 Glenwood, yep. So I was not a commuter student. I was actually one of the students that was dorming at St. Peter's. So.
Wow. So how did St. Peter's get on your radar? Like, how did you?
Okay, so this is a good way. It kind of relates to, some of the Jesuit background that I'm so intertwined with. The Jesuits that I'm so intertwined with because of my life. As I said, I went to Xavier High School, which is on 16th Street in Manhattan. One time I was in the guidance office. I don't know, I love hanging out there between periods. And there was a notice on the bulletin board that said, it must have been close to summer break, summer scholars. They were giving summer scholarships at St. Peter's. I was a junior at that time and going into my senior year, I was ending my junior year. And I asked the guidance counselor, is it worth doing this, right? Basically, it was a program where you could take 2 college classes and get the credits and get a feel for college between your junior and senior year of high school. So I applied and got the summer scholarship and went to St. Peter's for the first summer. I can't remember. I can't remember what they were called. A summer session. It was a 4-week summer session. Or something like that. It was pretty quick. 4 or 6 weeks. And I took Introduction to Psychology, I think, and Intro to Basic. So and I aced those 2 classes as a junior in high school. I can't remember. Unfortunately, I can't remember who the psych teacher was, but the psych professor, I can't remember, but the Intro to Basic professor was Dr. Peter Alexander. I got four O's on both of those. And I think I ended up going for a second session. I can't remember what the second session was. But in my senior year, I got a call from the admissions office, I got a call saying, I think it was Dr. Jeannie Bender who even called me and said, would you like to come to St. Peter's on a full scholarship, right?
Wow.
Because Xavier High School, we have presidential scholarships available for graduates of Jesuit high schools in the metropolitan area. And I said, I'll apply. I said, sure, I'll apply. She goes, you do have to apply, but you're pretty much being offered the scholarship. And then when I was making my decisions around where I would go to school, my mom helped me a lot and said, you're going to the school that's giving you the free ride. So I said, I guess I'm going to the school where I'm getting a free ride. So that's how I got to St. Peter's.
That's a great advice.
Yeah, absolutely. I still give that advice to everybody. When you're picking schools, presumably when you applied, you were willing to go to all of them. And so if one of them's giving you a free ride, you take that one.
Yeah. That definitely narrows it down.
Yeah.
So what years did you go to St. Peter's?
I went from 1986 to 1991. I graduated on paper in 1991, but by the time I got to the 90 to 91 school year, I was pretty much doing a full-time job and attending night school, right? So, attending the evening sessions. I was doing that was to finish up my degree, right? But basically I was there for 5 years. I did the 5-year plan. But I'd like to say, that I basically did 5 years of elapsed time, but I pretty much, if you count all the classes that I actually went to versus the stuff that I ended up having to, where I was withdrawn because of absence, I probably did an actual 4 years worth.
So what was your major?
So I ended up graduating with a bachelor's degree in English literature.
In English?
English lit. I started as a comp sci major. So the computer science degree had 2 tracks when I was at St. Peter's, one for data processing and one for computer science. I started as a computer science / computer science student made with that major, where it was more towards what would now be called application development. I was studying to be a programmer, right? A computer scientist or a computer programmer, right? As opposed to data processing track, right? But that didn't quite pan out. I was not too thrilled with all the lab work that I had to do. By the time I got to college, it was 2 years. When you get to high school in your junior year, it wasn't that eventful for me. I didn't make a lot of friends, but when I finally got to St. Peter's, I started to have a real social life at that point. And being holed up in the basement. At that time, the lab was in the basement. Mm-hmm. I need to be able to do things and have a little bit more interaction, and so I switched to English.
That makes sense. That's a huge gap. Most people would not be good at English and computer science.
It's a very interesting thing. I still use all the stuff I learned in computer science today. But I also use everything that I learned in English in terms of critical thinking and being able to read volumes of words, and even if it bored you to death, you still had to slog through it because you had to write a term paper on it, or pass a test on it, or pass a quiz on it, right? So Lit gave me a lot. So did computer science. It was very good that I did both.
Yeah, that's a really unique perspective, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I'm happy to have done it that way. Could I have done it a different way? Sure, but I ended up doing well by what I chose in terms of a path when it came to majors. So.
Yeah. So were you involved on campus?
So back then, I started as in student government. I was a student senator when I was a sophomore. I was the president of the student senate in my junior year, and when I was a senator in the sophomore year, I was also the president of what was then known as the Filipino American Club, and I was very involved in campus ministry, in the M-House retreat program at the time. In the dorms, I was a resident assistant. So yeah, I pretty much was into the college life, both on the academic. I couldn't get the balance right at times, but I was very much into academic and yeah.
That's a lot going on.
Yeah, it was a lot, and sometimes too much. But and thankfully, with the guidance of the good Jesuits, the good administrators, and definitely the professors and advisors, it was a good, very, very good learning experience.
Mm-hmm. So what kind of issues did the student government work on at the time? Was there any major things?
The student government, well, what we were looking at was trying to figure out how to build school spirit. And I have to thank guys, I still remember it very well. There were these guys that who ran, some of us against each other. The people on my ticket that won were, ended up being the activities VP, I think is what we call it now, but he was the external VP, Scott Williams. Rich Bludges was the treasurer, and then Paul Green was the internal VP, running the government kind of stuff, and then Bernadette Dawes was the secretary. So we were all working together to try to figure out how we could get the students more involved, to really, we were beginning to have the on-campus population, and in what was traditionally a commuter school. So we were trying to figure out, what kind of activities could we give to everybody that they would enjoy, and build school spirit. I remember one of the things I remember most was, we had like a freshman orientation kind of speech thing, and we were giving out T-shirts so people would, we ended up creating something called the Peter Peacock, which is not what it's, I don't know what the peacock is called today, but we call the T-shirt Peter, St. Peter's, and I call it Peter Peacock. And
yep, that's his name.
A good friend of mine, well, maybe that's what his name. I don't want to claim that I made the guy. Right? we said Peter Peacock, and a friend of mine drew the T-shirt. A friend of mine did the color separation for the silk screening. Another good friend went and looked for the supplier insurance and who printed them. So those are the kind of things that we did. Tried to get a concert going, and it was all about building spirit. And, we had big debates on who to bring in at that point. I can remember I think Paul wanted to bring in at that time. If we had done this, we would have been, I think, big names in history of St. Peter's. He had wanted to try to get Guns N' Roses in here and there. But we ended up with somebody that was, we ended up with Angela Bofill. I don't know if you're a great jazz singer. Written up blues, and so Scott ended up running that show. And it was a great student government. It doesn't issues per se. That was, those are the kind of easy ones where we were trying to build spirit. I remember one of the controversial ones was, there were not enough football players, so we thought that it would not be good for Canada, but so they suspended the program during my term as president. So we had come out in support of the football team, saying, look, can you please not suspend the program this year. We were even in the Jersey Journal because we had a rally on behalf of the St. Peter's College football team.
Wow.
So yeah, I remember a reporter coming up to get a quote from me. I might even still have the article somewhere, but I'm not sure. So, but those were my 15 minutes in print.
People still talk about how they wish we had a football team.
Yeah, it's amazing, right? That what kind of spirit sports can bring. It was difficult. Look, now that I'm well into my 52nd year on this earth, I can understand why they didn't pretty much for safety because there were not enough kids to be able to rotate through. And the resources involved running a football team, it's just amazingly difficult in terms of financials. So the college, it's, it was, the adults still ran it, and they knew what they were doing. The trustees and the administration, Father Ed Glynn, God bless his soul. They knew what they were doing, and it was right to do it then. But as students, we wanted our football. So,
of course.
so anyway, so that was the controversial issue of the day for us. There weren't, there weren't any big social unrest type stuff going on when I was president, but there were some things that made, actually pretty quiet years from 86 to 91, to be frank, now that I try to recall whether there were any big things that happened when I was at the college that are kind of happening today. I mean, look, similar issues existed back then, right? Where, racial equality and, immigration, especially for us at St. Peter's, which is a very, very diverse school, those issues were there, but I can't remember kind of the same kind of level of difficulties as we are now experiencing. That just, I can't remember an issue, for example, like George Floyd or those kind of things. I can't remember anything happening like that back when I was in college.
So it didn't play as like major of a role, like political issues on campus at that time?
If there were, maybe that's the commentary that, on how you guys have evolved much more than we were when we were in school. As I said, we were more concerned about which band or which entertainment act we were going to try to bring in. Were there issues with race or issues with diversity? And, back then, pride wasn't even a big thing. Nowadays it's a forefront for everybody. Look, there must have been, but maybe we cared more about being kids than we did about being adults sometimes. I'll be the first one to admit it, and maybe the college did a good job of insulating us from that, while still continuing to educate us to always look for what was just and what was right. I mean, I was part of a small group of people that Sister Pat Daly called the Peace and Justice Group. We were looking at things like hunger and poverty, and I remember even going to Washington D.C. visiting a bunch of congressmen, including the Honorable Frank Guarini. Did I lose you?
Oh, you're back.
Frank Guarini, and we visited one of the great congressmen, Donald Payne, and we were talking things about how the WIC program and then we went to Oxfam event. So there was always these issues that existed then, exist today. Some are magnified, some are some we've made great inroads on, but there was enough focus in trying to get us to look at these things. But I don't remember anything as kind of incendiary as the things that are going on today.
Yeah, I know what you mean. They still have similar stuff where they go to DC, meet with Congress people.
Amnesty International, right? Those kind of things. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So and you
I mean, look, maybe it was a bit of an insulated life. I don't know. I was concerned. I wanted to make a difference. Most of us all wanted to make a difference. I don't know whether it's still called the Black Action Committee, but it was the Black Action Committee.
Yep, it's still called that.
The Hispanic American Club, and so there was the Indo-Pac Alliance, I think back then it was called. So there was a lot of things that were and maybe that's what made it a little bit more insulated, because the school itself was pretty diverse. We were used to differences. Right?
Yeah.
And people got along. So it was actually very nice that way.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, It is such a diverse place. That's like one of the things that's most special about it.
Yeah.
And so was there a big Filipino community on campus?
I would say yes, right? Jersey City at the time had had its fair share of Filipinos. I think it became a bit of an operating for there's a Manila Avenue near Newport, right? So when I got there, I was very surprised at the number. I didn't know that. When I went to summer school between my junior and senior year of high school, there weren't a lot of Filipinos in my class. So when I got there, I was pleasantly surprised that the Filipino community was a fairly numerous one, a big one, and active, right, in terms of the Filipino American club. So there was a big number, amongst other Asians, Southeast Asian, South Asian groups. So there's a pretty good number of Asians at St. Peter's.
What kind of stuff did you guys do in the club?
For the St. Peter's Filipino American Club, when I was president, we did that cycle. We would do fundraisers and then then give that to charity. That we ran a few dances where we made a good set of money, so we would balance it out by giving to charity and also running some events for the club itself. So when we would run a dance, we do a split of 50-50 on the revenue, the net, right, the profit, and we were making a good profit back then because the Filipino community really did come, and the kids would come to St. Peter's for those parties. We'd bring in some good non-Filipino DJs, and so the Filipinos in the neighborhood would come, and we were back then we would be able to raise like $4,000, $2,000. During my term, we would give half of that to charity. We were able to support some just volunteers in the Philippines because of that. But then we were also able to go on ski trips and and do some dinners at the I think the VIP is gone now, but the VIP diner, right? So we would do things like that, have parties of our own. So that participated in the food fest, the International Food Fest, and overall student government kind of participation. So I was trying to up the participation of the Philippine community in the wider college community and make it a little bit more marked there. But one of the proudest things I did there was do that, be able to support a couple of Jesuit volunteers for a year here in the Philippines at the time.
Able to what?
We were able to give some money to support Jesuit volunteers in the Philippines for a year or so. So that was a pretty proud moment for me. I think it was a bit of a first for the club that we were able to support a set of volunteers for over here.
And what were the volunteers working on?
Similar to the Jesuit Volunteer Corps, they'd go to the lesser, that was the equivalent in the Philippines, the Jesuit Volunteers Philippines was the Jesuit Volunteer Corps here, right? Yeah. So they would go to lesser privileged areas and do teaching and then live and immerse. So for the volunteers, it would be an ability to live out an Ignatian set of values, while giving back to the community. So 2 of those volunteers, I think we supported for a year with the proceeds we got from one dance or something.
Wow, that is really a great accomplishment. So how do you?
What? I'm very proud of that one. I still am.
Yeah, you should be. It's not easy to raise money for clubs. I've tried. I don't think we've ever
Well, the community would support our activities, right? That's the only way to get it. So the community, we ran things that the community wanted to get, the local community, not just the St. Peter's community. The fact it probably attracted more from the community than it did at St. Peter's.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But in my view, it was always a good way to get the name out there in terms of St. Peter's and what impact we had on, various communities that we were part of.
Yeah. So, I guess could you collaborate with the wider community often with the club?
We had some collaboration, right? But back then most of the clubs kind of ran their own teams. And when I did become student government president, that's what we tried to do, was try to get a little bit more cross-club collaboration, right? With things like homecoming and, Scott was the one with the idea to revive a homecoming tradition. And so he reached out as external vice president to a lot of the clubs and try to, say how can they help the homecoming. So that was what we were kind of doing. Another one of the things we were trying to do during our term as student government leaders.
And so by the time you graduated, you were working a full-time job, you said?
Yeah, so one of the great things about St. Peter's is the cooperative education program. Back then it was Peter Gottlieb and Sandra Bees and Riley, and even Enzo Alfonso, I think. Career development was run by Bill Stobbs. One of the things that was good about the location between Newark and New York, there was a lot of work available because they needed some cheap labor for students, right? So I ended up at Bankers Trust after, during my senior year, my fourth year. And so my fifth year, I had then become a full-time worker at Bankers Trust while I was finishing my English degree in the evenings at St. Peter's. So I was working a full-time job and then doing a couple of courses at night to fill out my electives and actually finish one of the big courses I had to do Shakespeare with Father McCarthy, because I missed the course, so I had to do kind of a one-on-one with him. Big, thick Shakespeare book that we had to go through. So,
oh man.
Yeah. So so yes, I was working full time, but in 1990, so I needed to finish school at night. During the evening session.
And how was the evening sessions? Like, what were those like?
It was very interesting. So the courses I remember doing during the evenings were things like Intro to Accounting. So I was one of the youngest ones in those college courses, right? Because the evening courses were geared towards folks who had entered professional work and did not quite finish their bachelor's degree. Some of them had their associates, or some of them were still doing their college degree because they needed to work in the mornings and during the day, so they only had time to go to school at night. A lot of them were already in their kind of very adult years. Some of them were parents, and so that was a pretty different experience when you're in there with folks that had mortgages, rents to pay, and all that. Whereas I'm fresh off of dorms that were paid for by being an RA and a full scholarship, right? So these guys were paying their own ride, or their work was sponsoring them to get their degrees. So I think that kind of age diversity was introduced where I was able to kind of relate to and then maybe help you mature a bit more. Right. So that was what I remember most about the evening courses. I felt a little out of place just because I was one of the younger guys there.
Yeah.
Younger people there. So.
Well, I guess being out of place sometimes means you get to grow, which is cool.
Yeah, I thought it was part, now in retrospect as we're talking about it, it probably was a big contributor to this, maturing during that time.
So are there any, I know you just mentioned Enzo Fonzo, who I love him. Is there anyone else that stands out to you from your time there?
There are a ton of people, right? I mean, this is going to be like an Oscar speech if I said these are the folks that stood out. Right? Because as I said, I was involved in many things. From my freshman year all the way to my fifth year, to say is there any one person that stood out would be unfair to all the people that actually had a significant influence in who I became. From my year -1 when I was a junior in high school, right into my senior year, I remember Dr. Alexander, I remember Dr. John Walsh, their legends like Dr. John Benson, and even if you had back then the communications professor was Professor Conniff, right, and he helped a lot in terms of even the way I speak, public speaking, and then there are people like Carlo Galasso and Don Mulgari and John Mullen. These guys at Campus Ministry, Ed Bruder, bless his soul, Father Ed Hevy, all these guys, all really invested in St. Peter's and really touched many, many students' lives. And if you were at the college and taking it all in, it was inevitable that you would run into all these people. Like, as you said, if I wouldn't have gotten my job if it were not for Sandra Riley and people like her and Peter Gottlieb, and then even and their resume that people like Enzo helped with, and so the Slums, and because you're student government president, you get to sit on the trustees, so you need people there, right? It was like Fabi Lynn and all those guys, right? So there wasn't any one person, but but those are all people in Santa. I think collectively they're all really good to college. And I'd be hard pressed to name just one. So that's why I just named the whole cast of characters that come to my head. And I'm sure I missed anybody. If I missed anybody and they're watching their video and they say, Rob, how did you forget me? It's not that I've forgotten, it's just that I just can't keep going. If I can go, and then we would never get off this question.
Yeah, you got it right. That's a lot of names.
They're pulling me off the stage already, right?
So, where did your career go after you graduated?
So, as I said, I joined the bank back, when I was in my senior year, named Bankers. It was called Bankers Trust Company back then. I was started off as a clerk doing data entry for, what was called financial planning and control, which is essentially doing budgets and, reporting, management information reporting. After that, I basically continued my career in finance. I went to Credit Suisse, where I stayed for 18 years, and then I moved to Deutsche Bank here in Manila, which was back in 2011. And Deutsche Bank happened to have bought Bankers Trust. And now I work for the biggest bank in the Philippines called BDO, Banco de Oro. So my career has been decidedly numbers focused. So, when people ask what did I major in, did I major in finance or business or accounting, and I always say English literature. People are always flabbergasted that I ended up with a career in operations and product control and financial control. And so, project management, IT, and all that. So I've had a really diverse career in banking and global financial services, which is not normally what you would hear from an English lit major, but that's where I'm at.
Wow. So when you moved back to the Philippines, was that because of your job, or? I
got a job offer here, and I thought that my career could take a further build up, would build up further here, given all the moves of a lot of the what they refer to as back office jobs away from the expensive locations like New York and London and Singapore and Hong Kong to places like the Philippines and India. And even Eastern Europe, I remember Prague, I think, had some offices as well, and Poland as well. So there's these service centers to the world there. So I wanted to further my career, so I came out here to work for Deutsche Bank.
Was this the first time you've lived in the Philippines since you originally moved?
Yeah, actually, since when I left in '84, I came back to the Philippines to visit few times, but I came back to live here in 2011. So I'm 52. I moved when I was 15. So I moved back when I was 42. So I've still spent more years outside of the Philippines than in, right? So when I was 15, 2011 to 2021, it's 10 because the 14 is 24. I'm 52, so I spent more years outside of the Philippines than I have living here. But it's been a good run. So
yeah, full circle.
Yeah, full circle. Exactly.
Were you among? I know you mentioned that there was a lot of Asians at St. Peter's, but was it common for people to have been born in another country and immigrated here, or were you more one of the only ones?
No, there are not a lot of Filipinos born in the U.S. that were in the Filipino American Club, at least. I mean, I think if there was, for the folks that were immigrants, like the Latin America, the South America, population, and even the other Asian nations. Most of us were probably people that have moved from another country to the States, the US. But most of the other guys, that I hung out with are years and years of, their immigrant story would have began back when the Irish or the Italians came over.
Yeah.
Or in some of the cases, some of it's, or it came over from, Jamaica or wherever. Right? So that their immigration story is well behind. So ours, we are the more recent immigrants. So if you're Filipino, Indian, Pakistani, or we're from places like Chile or Argentina or Uruguay, those places where those guys were likely to be the first folks that landed in the U.S. actually may not even, not even first generation, right? Because the kids would be the first generation that would be born. So we were all immigrants. So a lot of immigrants. There were a lot of immigrants.
So you're in good company.
Yeah, I was in good company.
And you felt like the campus was like welcoming to anyone who's going to.
Yeah, I never felt like an outsider at St. Peter's. It was welcoming from day one, and continues to be, I think.
And did they have I know now they have services with English as a second language, and I think they have stuff.
No, all that was there. I didn't need it. I mean, I was native. First language was English, actually. I mean, I might have had an accent when I moved to New York, but by the time I got to Jersey City, I pretty much had a neutral accent, and so I spoke English when I was in the Philippines. But I do know that there were other kids that I remember there were people that weren't at the ESL lab. There was an ESL lab at Pope that helped people with challenges with English. So.
Yeah, a lot of places still don't even have programs like that.
Yeah, no, it was definitely meant, and it was always like that. I remember when I was going to St. Peter's, one of the things they talked about how it evolved is it had always been a school for immigrants. Maybe it was first for the Italians and the Irish, but later on it became for folks like myself, the Philippines, or as I said, the Spanish countries in the South, Chile. I remember meeting people from Chile, right? Those were first people I ever met from Chile, but they're there.
So, were you the first person in your family to go to college?
No. My mom is a college graduate here from the Philippines. So is my dad. My dad went to Jesuit University in the Philippines called the Ateneo. My mom went to St. Lucia's University in Nevada. They were run by which nun? I can't remember which nuns run that. But I was not first generation college. My mom and dad were college grads. My mom was a teacher. My dad was in management and sales and marketing here in the Philippines and was a teacher before that. My dad, when we went to the US, became a teacher. My mom went and worked as it was a bookkeeper. Continues to be a bookkeeper for a jewelry manufacturer in New York City.
Wow.
So, no, I'm not first generation college. Second.
But first generation in America, or just?
Yeah, I was the first one that got a degree in the States from my generation. My mom and dad, their siblings all got college degrees from the Philippines.
That's really interesting. And have you returned to St. Peter since you graduated?
Oh, a lot. I mean, that's very involved, right? I mean, thanks to people like Leah Lito, right? I mean, they keep us involved as alums, right? I mean, I was. For a while, I was on the alumni board, then I was on the board of regents, then on the board of trustees. So I was there frequently. We would be asked to, and before I was part of those boards, I was asked to, relay some stories as an English lit major. And I stayed very well connected to the college. Right? And, the fact is, it was a Jersey City, so it was easy to go to. So it was very much a part of my life. I can't imagine not going back. Even when I go back from the Philippines to the US, I would always take time to visit the college or the now university.
So what keeps you bringing back?
Why do I keep going back to St. Peter's? Well,
yeah.
Because it's part of who I am, right? And I always like to go back, and feel and renew my roots. And there are people that I still go back to, that I still see, that are still there. I know as I grow older that might change, but right now that folks like, I like seeing Lynn, and I like going back, just looking at how things have changed, and yet how things are very much the same, right? So yes, we didn't have the students at the center, student center back in the day, and we only had the Anatelli, and but so that's the kind of stuff that I love going back to and see how it's become, a different place, but still same in terms of character, in terms of what it does for students and the community. And a part of it also, I have to mention, right? I do feel that I owe a lot to St. Peter's, right, for who I've become, and many things make who we are, but St. Peter's as an experience, as an education, as a life event, did a lot to form who I am today. So in order, like anything, you need to feed that, and when you go back to your roots, it really does help you recharge and understand, and really understand who you've become from where you've been, right? So
Yeah, absolutely.
that's why.
Yeah, I've had that same experience just doing these interviews. It has been, it sounds like every interview I'm like, wow, that sounds just like now, but also so different from now. So why do you think that?
St. Peter's is a great place, right? And look, we wouldn't be invited to talk to you guys if we didn't feel that heart pump. But nothing's ever perfect. But you go back because it's who you are. It's your family. It's your family. It's your family. It's your friends. And, my brother went to St. Peter's. And, some of my longest friends I made at St. Peter's, right? So.
Wow. So you're still friends with people who went there?
Sorry, what was that?
You were still friends with people who went there while you were there?
My best friends are from St. Peter's, right? So, that one's easy. I won't miss that, right? Rob Duncan was my roommate, still very much friends, pretty much like brothers. Bill Price, same. My good friends, Malu Bustamante, Dindo Bustamante, Jerry Angeles, Brenda Angeles. We still see each other, we still kept in touch. I made these guys are my lifelong friends. Some people make their lifelong friends in high school. I made my lifelong friends at St. Peter's. Those are the shoulders I cry on. Those are the guys that get on my case. Right? So all St. Peter's people.
Wow, that's amazing. And what about I guess the fact that it's a Jesuit school specifically, how has that impacted your life?
So, as I mentioned to you when you asked me about college first generation, my dad went to the Ateneo here in the Philippines, which is a Jesuit school that basically dates back to it's older, probably what 1800s it started, right? It's older than St. Peter's, the Ateneo, from what I understand. But and then I went to a Jesuit school in the Philippines called Xavier. So those were run by the China Province Jesuits. And then when I transferred to New York, I went to Xavier High School in New York, which was run by the Jesuits. I went to St. Peter's College, which was run by the Jesuits. And I'm still very good friends with folks like Don Moldari, Dan Fitzpatrick. These guys are both Jesuits, and so it's kind of in my blood,
Yeah.
My dad was part of a Jesuit education tradition. I've not known any education other than Jesuit education, right? So St. Peter's had the retreat programs, had that kind of core curriculum that encouraged you to really think widely about the world. What it required you to do theology and philosophy, and then you were exposed. At my time, there was still a lot of priests there. Well, relatively a lot of priests compared to now, but less than when it was in the 60s and 70s. But we still had a lot of Jesuit influence there in terms of who we saw. The president was Jesuit, and the campus ministry was run by Jesuits, so and stocked with Jesuits. So you couldn't help but be exposed to the Ignatian character and everything. And then the retreat program was was brought to St. Peter's by Father John Mullen, and that also helped form us from a spirituality perspective. So, but the core personalities of the Jesuits, I remember hanging out. Father Pat Walsh's apartment in 148 Glenwood Avenue, having just talks about what to do with life, because you got to look at everything. God's in everything, so you got to look at everything with a wide view. So the Jesuits had a big influence, and I think it's a different character when you're educated by the Jesuits. You think widely, you think deeply, you're critical. If you choose to be, you're spiritual. So everything from faith to the way you think and act, the way even the way you kind of articulate yourself, whether it's written or verbal. I think most of us will be able to pick out another Jesuit educated individual as you get to know them, right?
Yeah,
because it works into who you are.
Yeah, definitely. I guess those are all my questions, but is there anything I didn't ask about that you think is important to mention?
Actually, I think we covered pretty much all of it, right? But I do want to say that I'm very thankful for what St. Peter, and I've said this before. I'm very thankful to St. Peter's. Right? You don't get to go to college for free often.
Yeah.
And I did, and in my case, you definitely don't get what you paid for. I got much more, right? I think most people would pay much more for what I got in terms of what St. Peter's has given. And I feel a debt of gratitude to St. Peter's, the people that run it, the institution in and of itself. And all the way back to Ignatius and founded the Jesuits. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who are still there at St. Peter's, keeping it vibrant and alive. People that are there from an admin and academic perspective, the faculty, the admin, the staff. It's just I'm thankful to be part of the St. Peter's University today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank
And
you,
me
Loretta.
too.
Thank
I
you very
also
much.
feel so grateful. It was so nice talking to you.
Same here. Nice to meet you. Thank you very
Nice
much.
to meet you. Have a good day.
rest of the day. I'm going to go to bed. Thank you. Bye-bye.